Hi there. In this video we're going to show you how to install Kognitio's analytical platform for Hadoop on Amazon's Elastic MapReduce product. Amazon's Elastic MapReduce product is a turnkey Hadoop cluster in the cloud solution, so you can click a few buttons and get a working Hadoop cluster very easily. Kognitio's product is an analytical SQL platform that sits on top of Hadoop and which can be started up and run very easily as a Yarn application, so it fits in very well with Elastic MapReduce. We have a blog post that we're going to be following in this video, and the URL is cognitio.com/cognitio-on-emr. So you can read the rationale behind the steps we're taking there. So we're going to go straight on to installing. Now, first of all, we need to prepare an S3 bucket that we can install from into Amazon's environment. So I've made an S3 bucket which I've called Hadoop EMR demo, and I've put the 4 files in it. The first 2 here have come from our website. The blog post tells you where to get them. And the second 2 are scripts which I have made from the information in this post. So the first one, master node setup, is this script, and I've changed the bucket name here to say Hadoop EMR demo. And then the second script, called node setup, is this one here. You can just paste these into an editor and upload them into an S3 bucket. What I would say is if you do it from Windows, these need to be in Unix format. So if you use Notepad and save the files, you need to convert them with DOS to Unix before putting them into an S3 bucket, otherwise they won't work. So now we're ready to create an EMR cluster. So if we go to Services, Analytics, EMR, we can create a cluster. So we're going to create a new cluster with the Create Cluster button. Now we have to use the advanced options because some of the options we want aren't in the basic ones. We'll use Amazon. This is the EMR version, we'll just use the latest. We don't want any of these pieces of software, so I'm going to turn them off. And we do need Zookeeper. In this box here, I usually put an extra line which is from the blog post, which just helps with debugging if we need to. So we're going to add a new step in order to configure the Kognitio on Hadoop software when the EMR cluster comes up. That will mean that the cluster will come up ready to create a Kognitio instance. So we are going to create a step of type custom jar. We're going to configure that, and we will name it master node setup. The jar location is the location of a jar which is provided by Amazon. This is a special jar which just runs the script which we already uploaded to EMR, to the S3 bucket. So we'll paste in the location of the jar and then the name of the script is the argument. So we will put in master setup, which is master setup here. And then we'll say continue on failure. It's not going to fail, so it's fine. And we won't auto-terminate the cluster after the last step's completed, obviously, because we want to set this up in an interactive way. Now, the next step here is basically choosing hardware that we're going to use in our EMR cluster. Now, EMR basically works with a master node, which drives everything. It has all the kind of name node and Yarn resource management processes. Then we have a core group, which has basically all the HDFS storage, and the Yarn applications can run here. We don't need task groups, we can get rid of that. Now in our case, I'm going to request spot instances because it's cheaper. And I'm going to choose R3.8x large for our node types. So in this example, we're going to make a cluster which has approximately 4 terabytes of RAM available for use for user data. Each of these R3.8x large instances is about 1/4 of a terabyte. So we're going to use 4 times 4, so I'm going to put 16 instances. I'm going to put a spot price. We can see the spot price is at 0.5, so I'm just going to put 0.7 to be on the safe side. Now, this does work in VPC or EC2 Classic. Obviously, if you choose the VPC, you get extra instance types that we can't see for EC2 Classic. But for the moment, we're just going to keep it simple. If you've used Amazon before and you know what Amazon VPC is, you know what to put there anyway. So now we'll go next. We can name the cluster EMR demo. And then we'll just leave all these settings alone. I'll put some tags. Now we're going to need to name the instances so that the instances that are spun up will show up with this name in the EC2 instance management screens. And I'm just going to put purpose demo video so that we can see later what that is. Bootstrap actions is the next thing we need to put in. So the bootstrap action configures each node to run Kognitio software. All this requires is the installation of some extra RPMs. So we're just going to run a custom action. We'll configure it. We'll name it node setup, and we will put the name of the other script which we uploaded to S3 as a script location. And we'll add that. Now this script, you can read what it does in the blog, basically just install some RPMs. So now we can click next, and we get to the last page. The EC2 key pair is basically a key pair that lets us access the nodes after they've come up. Now I've created one called EMR demo, and the private key has been downloaded onto this machine. If you don't already have a key pair, you can go into the EC2 management console and go into this key pairs option here and create one. These roles, generally you can just leave these alone. They get auto-created the first time you build an EMR cluster, so if you've already built one, these will be there. Otherwise it will say something like create default for these. Encryption options we don't need to set, although you can if you want. And the same here with the access groups. So the EC2 security groups basically define which ports will be open on the Elastic MapReduce nodes that come up. Okay, so by default, the EMR nodes can talk to each other, but they don't have any external access, and we need to open some ports up so we can SSH in to configure a Kognitio instance, and so that we can actually access that Kognitio instance. So I suggest leaving these groups alone because these are auto-created and you don't really want to mess with them, and just adding an extra security group. So I've pre-created one here. I'm going to show you it. So here it comes. So this security group, essentially I've just added this IP address, which is the computer I'm using. I've said port 22, which is SH, and port 6550, which is Kognitio's ODBC port, will be open from the nodes to this computer so I can access my cluster. So I'm just going to choose that, and I'm going to assign it to the master node. Now, I could also assign it to the core and task nodes. I'm going to do that. You don't have to, but it just means that I can SSH into the core nodes if I want to. If you don't do that, you can SSH into the master node and hop from them. So now I'm ready. So I'm going to hit create cluster, and it's going to build me an EMR cluster. So now you can see your cluster is starting up. Anytime you click on this cluster list, you'll be able to choose the cluster and get back into this window. We can see it's provisioning a bunch of Amazon instances. This will take about 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop talking now. Okay, so now we're done. We're saying the cluster is in state waiting, ready after the last step completed. Now you can see the steps we ran here. It added that one for us. Master node setup is the step we defined when we were creating the cluster. Everything's worked, so we can go into the hub and have a look. There's the master node group with one core node group. We can see all the different instances have been spun up. So now we're ready to create a Kognitio instance on our cluster. To do this, we're going to SSH into the master node. Essentially, the EMR master node is also going to be our Kognitio master node, which we're going to use, we call it the edge node, which we're going to use to define and start up our instance. So up here, the master node's name has been defined. Now, we're going to SSH into it. Amazon does give you some handy instructions for how to SSH into it. Basically, for a Mac, it just says open a terminal and run SSH, and that's what we're going to do. So we will copy the name. We're going to open up a terminal, and we're going to SSH using the private key that goes with the key pair we used when defining the cluster. So that is in desktop emrdemo.pm. We're going to SSH to a user called Hadoop, which our master node setup script that we defined has created. And then we're going to put the node name in, and away we go. And now we're in. We're on our EMR cluster, so we can list the nodes in the cluster with yarn node minus list, and that's going to give us a list of the names of all the nodes we've got. Then we're going to take one of the nodes and we can look at it, and we can do yarn node minus status. These commands are in the blog if you go and read that if you want more detail. And we're going to paste that in. And this is going to tell us how much resource each node has available. That's the amount of memory it has available. This is the amount of vCores that the node has available. So we're going to create a Kognitio instance that uses the whole EMR cluster. You don't have to do this, but we're going to. First thing we're going to do is we're just going to run Hadoop once without any arguments, and we're going to accept the EULA. I'm not going to display it on the screen. I'm going to say yes, and that gives us a bunch of useful links that you can follow later. In particular, if you follow this first link, it's a forum thread that contains links to allow you to download the client tools which you use to access the instance from other nodes. We've already installed the client tools on this node, so I'm not going to show you that. So now I need to create a cluster. I'm going to use this memory capacity. I need to leave 2 gig of memory and 1 vCore for container management purposes. So I'm just going to use container mem size equals, I'm going to use 239,000 megabytes. And then I'm going to say container vCores 63. Now I've got 16 nodes, and I know that, so I'm going to do container count equals 63. And then I'm going to create a cluster. Now it is possible to automate this. This step I'm doing manually, but in the same way that we automated the master node setup, you could write a script which would basically look at all these nodes, find out this information, and automatically, oops, that should be, yeah, and automatically set this up. I'm going to do it this way. Hadoop create cluster. And I'm going to call it EMR. And there we go. So it's going to look and prepare this, and it's going to tell me what it's going to do. So it's telling me it's going to make 16 containers. Each one is about 1/4 terabyte, using nearly all the vCores. The external gateway port is the one that we've allowed through, so that's all good. So now I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to go and build a cluster. And my Kognitio instance will be available when that finishes. Okay, and now it's finished. So our Kognitio instance is now running, and we can start an SQL session and interact with it. So the quickest way to start an SQL session, just to test things out, is to do Hadoop SQL. Now we call our cluster EMR, so we'll just put that in. And the password, this is the logging in as the sys user. The password will be EMR, which is the same as the connection name. Now we'll just run a quick query to see if all the nodes are there. So we can do select OS node name, mem total from node info. Here we go. And there we are. So we've got all the nodes in the Amazon EMR core group and the memory size for each node. So we've got a lot of memory and we can sum that. So we can do select sum mem total from IP node info, and it should be about 4 terabytes. There we go. So now really we're going to want to connect from other tools and run SQL. Very quickly, I'm going to show you how to do that. I've got Kognitio console. This is part of the Kognitio client tools bundle, which we previously installed on the Mac. So I'm going to bring up Kognitio console. I'm going to connect. So what I need to do, I haven't bothered to define a data source, so I'm just going to use the IP address here. Now, I'm going to use actually the node's name, which came from here. I'm going to put that in there. Port 6550, user ID sys, and the password is EMR. And we can connect. And the spinner spins. And there we are, it's connected. So if we click on the system and double click, we can see a brief summary. And there we are. So that's telling us the same information. It's changed the RAM gigabytes because this is showing us usable memory for actual data, whereas previously we were looking at how much memory the actual instance has. Some of the memory is used for compiling and various other things. And so now we're just going to run a query on this just to show that it works. New SQL query, and I'll put the same query I ran earlier. Select, we'll just do star from IP node info, and then run that, execute. And here we go. So now we can see the various, it's got the instance names, we've even got the Hadoop container names that are running. And now our instance is ready to do some actual real work. The next step would be to build some memory images with data in and run SQL on it. I'm not going to show you that now. I'm going to end this video now, and the next video in the series will show you some things that you can do with a Kognitio cluster.